Today on The Independent, my interview with Joe Montana from Guinness in Dublin. We also welcome Ryan Harris to the show to talk a little bit about what he learned from the Navy game, what may be coming up this season. Then Matt and I talk about things we're working on, preview Tennessee State a little bit, and where the season might be going today on The Independent.
Welcome to Week 1, Game 2, midweek episode of The Independent. I'm Matt Fortuna, joined as always by my co-host Pete Sampson, who is back and in one piece. Looks like your car made it from Chicago to South Bend. Looks like your plane made it from Dublin to London to Chicago. And hey, you had a cooler Guinness Storehouse experience than I think most of us get when we go there, because you got to talk to a living legend.
Yeah, that's true. It was a cool experience. If you've seen my new Twitter avatar, that was fairly impressive. I don't know how you put someone's face on the foamy head of a Guinness, but Guinness has figured it out. And I did make it back in one piece. I had to replace the battery on my Highlander yesterday because I don't think I would be taking many road trips beyond that trip to O'Hare. But yeah, it was, it was a long bumpy road back, to paraphrase Marcus Freeman. I did not get on the direct flight from Dublin to South Bend, even though I saw it on the monitor in the Dublin airport, just sort of teasing me on Sunday morning. But made it back.
Was that the team's flight, or was there actually?
That was the team's flight.
Okay.
There was no other flight.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, it was strange. Like I was in security, and a couple rows in front of me was Marty Biaggi, the special teams coach, just like with his wife, but like no other players or coaches around. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I know Spencer Schrader missed a field goal, but like, it seems pretty harsh to make a change overnight here, Marcus. But then, got through security. I think Jason Anier and Ramon Henderson saw them walking around the airport. We had a mutual friend of ours ran into Marcus and Chancey Stuckey, congratulated them on the performance the night before. But it was intense to get back. It was a great scene, but Sunday I got 90 minutes of sleep. We did our show, wrote my stuff, went to the airport. The cabbie thought I wanted to go to Dublin Port, not Dublin Airport. And then I think I walked in my house around 7:00. So I think overall it was about 18 hours, if my math is correct, to get from point A to point B, with one dead car battery at the very end of it. So I made it back.
And the athletic director likes to talk about how we need to regionalize scheduling in college football more often. But we'll take it if you can go to Dublin. I'm a similar boat, 4-year-old with a double ear infection, 6-month-old who's teething. So 90 minutes is I'm sympathizing with you. I just don't have like the Guinness hangover or excitement coming through with it as you are as well. I think we're doing better than some other Notre Dame podcast hosts are this week. That's all I'm going to say about that. Hopefully we don't go viral. Although, we never had a live YouTube stream on our old show like we do now. So who's to say it didn't happen at some point over the last 4 years? I was a little cautious when I went to Dunkin' Donuts this morning, and I ordered one donut, which I probably shouldn't have done. I got home and there were 2 in my bag. So it's only number 2 reference I will make for the rest of the show and hopefully this season. We do have 2 guests today, actually. So Joe Montana, you mentioned. We will get to that shortly. We also talked to Ryan Harris, friend of the program. Talk about a busy man. I mean, wow. 2 games in 2 countries, albeit virtually. But he had an Instagram video kind of detailing his day, and it looked a lot easier than it actually was, I'm sure. But calling Notre Dame's opener on the radio from a studio in Denver, then calling the Broncos preseason finale later that night. That's a lot of football. That's a lot of names to memorize. That's a lot of hours you got to be sharpened on your A game. And he's one of the best in the business. We are happy to have him on and to talk a little bit about what he saw from the midshipman game and what that could possibly mean for the Irish moving forward. He also had a lot of interesting historical thoughts just as a former player and an alum, and what it means for Notre Dame to have this opportunity to play Tennessee State this Saturday at HBCU, coached by pro football legend Eddie George. I know it's a game that raised a lot of eyebrows, mine included, initially when it got announced last April. But I think as we get closer to the game and the event, there seems to be an understanding and appreciation for what this event because that's what it is, will mean for people far beyond Notre Dame. Pete, you'll be there. I'm sure the marching band will be a show in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
What aside from the fact that, hey, it's the first home game, first time you're covering a game at Notre Dame Stadium this Saturday, what are you most looking forward to just at the game in general?
So for this game, I'm still working through the details, but I think I'm going to watch this one from the stands. And I don't know if you remember the story that I did on Brian Kelly from the Georgia Tech game 2 years ago. It turned out to be
his last home game.
Yeah, his last home game. Where essentially I sat in row 4 or 5 behind the Notre Dame bench and watched him watch Notre Dame. I think I'm going to attempt to do that on Saturday from those same seats, either with Marcus Freeman or Sam Hartman. I think I'm leaning towards Marcus because he will have to coach the whole game. Sam Hartman won't have to play the whole game. And Tate and Sloan probably will be there with me. So that, we'll make some interesting Twitter commentary. I may have them, chime in with their analysis to see what they think of it. So that, and then, the band show should be awesome. I'm looking forward to that. It like on the field, and I think it's Steve Angeli, I've said, is the most important number 2 on the team, and this is a team with a lot of really good number 2s. But
can we stop talking about number 2 on the show, Pete?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I broke the seal on that. Oh, I just did it again. So I would say that getting him some work for real. Through one pass against Navy, that's fine. But you got to get a scouting report on him if you're Notre Dame. Not for the sake of this season, hopefully, but for the sake of next season, before you move forward. So that's it's definitely a deeper cut of like what you're looking for, but that's what FCS or lower FBS team games are like. You want to learn something about the backups, because I don't think we're going to come away with any great revelations about Joe Alt or Audric Estime or Sam Hartman or Jack Kaiser or JD Bertrand. Maybe the safety play a little bit, because the secondary just, not that it was an off week, but it wasn't quote unquote real football for a secondary against a team that I think threw it 6 times. And we just don't know what Ramon Henderson, I think we know Xavier Watts is going to be good. DJ Brown, Carter, the transfer from Rhode Island, what do you have there? So I think there's something to be learned, Clarence Lewis, Thomas Harper. So there's stuff to pick up that matters the rest of the season. It's just like, you got to look a little bit more closely. I'm not sure, you won't be here this weekend. I don't know. Are you traveling for,
I am. Prime? I'm going to see Coach Prime on the subject of HBCU. He's a former Jackson State head coach. His debut, against TCU will be, I think, 102 degrees at kickoff. So I won't be wearing a hoodie during that one. That's for sure. I gotta be honest with you, I think Notre Dame has as good of a chance to beat Tennessee TCU has as good of a chance to beat Colorado by more points than Notre Dame will Tennessee State. I think this is going to be a blowout. I could be completely wrong, and that's kind of the appeal, because no one really knows what you're going to get out of Coach Prime and his complete roster makeover, but he's taken over a team that won just 1 game last year. And in my mind, there's no more disrespected football entity right now than TCU, which is coming off a national championship game appearance and should have another loaded team this year. But that's an early one, so I will hopefully be in one piece, body temperature wise, by the end of that one, in time for the start of Notre Dame, Tennessee State.
Yeah, it should be good. All right. Well, we're going to spin it forward to our 2 guests today. First up, Joe Montana, where I chatted with him about some Notre Dame stuff, how he got involved with Guinness, and then, potentially giving a campus tour in October. That unfortunately is not going to happen, but you'll get my reference once we get to the interview. And then Ryan Harris talking a little bit about calling last week's game, what he's looking forward to this weekend, and why it's significant for Notre Dame to host a HBCU on Saturday. Matt, what have you always said is my biggest weakness on fall Saturdays?
Well, Pete, I'd say your hair, but who am I to talk? Let's go with your wardrobe.
Harsh but fair.
As a friend and your co-host, let me tell you about the exclusive clothier of Notre Dame football, ESQ. ESQ outfits over 400 professional athletes, celebrities, Marcus Freeman, and Irish players on game day, with bespoke clothing that elevates their game off the field. ESQ sculpts every garment with precision, helping you look your best for work, weddings, celebrations, or in your case, Pete, the press box.
Listeners of The Independent can get 15% off their first online order by using the code IND15 at checkout. That's IND15, or visit them at their Chicago showroom for a full custom look. Head to esqclothing.com to create your perfect fit. Like, how did you originally sort of like get connected with Guinness? It's like in modern college football terms, it's like the best NIL deal going.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of a combination of things. One, obviously, when they started their relationship with Notre Dame alumni, and they had come to us, I guess, and they were looking for, I guess, someone, and it made all of a sudden my story kind of fit almost exactly what everybody thinks about Guinness. We came to Ireland looking at jumping horses for the kids and the girls.
Okay.
I don't know, Alexandra actually jumped for 1 year, or I think her freshman year, and then she gave up because it was too cold at Notre Dame.
Oh, okay.
But and it was cheaper to buy horses here or France and ship them back to the U.S. and than it was to buy them in the U.S.
Okay.
It makes total crazy no sense.
Yeah.
But to find good horses and that, you really had to pay ridiculous money over there. So we were over here looking at horses, and one of the trainers and trainer's husband said, "Hey man, when the girls are done jumping, we'll go get a pint." And I go, okay, you know, it's kind of like hung and hawing. It's like everybody else, you look at the beer, it looks really heavy and dark and bitter, so Charlie goes to get the beer, and he goes, "Go sit down, I'll get it." And he comes back, and I go, "Where's the beer, Charlie?" He goes, "No, you got to wait for it." And I was like, okay. And then once we tasted it, it was so different than what you expected. And every day after that, I was going, "Charlie, isn't it time for a pint?" So, you know, when you look at the original ads that we did, it was always about that similar process of which people have this vision of what Guinness is and what it tastes like because of what it looks like, and it's nowhere near anything that. And so I story fit kind of right into what they were looking to do, and then obviously you add in the Notre Dame connection.
Right. So. Tell me a little bit, like your relationship with Notre Dame. I was interested, like how that sort of ebbed and flowed over the years, and sort of where that is now.
Yeah, I love the place. You know, obviously we had an issue there that took place that kind of separated me until that person left. And it's only and I don't even like going over it, but if he treats everyone the same, it would be different, but he didn't, you know. And I watch it, I look for him all the time, I watch him every time I get it. We're not gone somewhere that I can't see the game, but other than that, it's one of those places I dreamed about going as a kid, and those things don't go away. Even grew up outside of Pittsburgh when they were winning Super Bowls, and as a kid, that doesn't go away either.
Right.
That's kind of how it is here. It's just, I don't get back to Pittsburgh much. I don't get back to Notre Dame much, mainly because we're pretty much a Dew family.
Yeah.
I'm not a very good spectator. So,
when's the last time you went to a game?
Oh my gosh. It's been a few years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tomorrow or Saturday will be one of the first times in a while then.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And what, in terms of Marcus Freeman, I don't know if you've had any interactions with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't had any recently because I got crazy hacked.
Oh, okay.
And I had to change everything.
Okay.
So I haven't heard from him because I'm sure he doesn't have my new email or phone numbers or anything, because I literally been dealing with this for 4 months, and I just had to finally shut everything down. But usually, yeah, I was talking to him a few times a year. But still, ever since he took over, he's been trying to get us to come out there to a game.
Okay.
I'm trying to get there, but last year we traveled through most of the season.
Okay.
So
got it.
But yeah, I like him a lot. I think he's great.
Is it, I mean, kind of like a modern coach for college kids in 2023? Do you sort of see like that youth come through?
Oh yeah, for sure. He's got a great rapport and relationship with the guys, and I guess they always say experience is everything, but sometimes youth is also, it helps him understand.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what they're going through at this time.
Yeah.
Because he's been there not too long ago.
Got it. Yeah. Do you have sort of a ritual watching the games? Like, I don't know if you have a place in your house that you watch them, or you're traveling all the time where you're watching them, or? No,
it all varies.
Okay.
Yeah, wherever we like to watch them, we have an outdoor deck up at an outdoor TV out actually down in our yard in San Francisco. So usually one of the two, either up there or down below, depending on if it's too hot up on the deck.
Got it. Well, I'll wrap up on this. USC comes to Notre Dame in October. USC has a receiver named Brendan Rice. You know his dad a little bit.
Yep.
Any chance you'll be in town for that game to show Jerry around?
I can't remember. When's the date?
It's like mid-October.
It's close.
Yeah.
We'll be in Hawaii, I think, for a wedding.
Okay.
Believe it or not.
Got it.
And the only reason I know that is it's two of the kids' birthdays are in the first part of October, and I know we go from there till I think we rented a place for a couple weeks. So most likely we'll be watching it from.
It'll be a day game for you in Hawaii, and night game for us in South Bend.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. It will be interesting. Sort of. I'm sure Jerry will make it out and walk around your old campus.
It'll be on the wrong side of the field.
Yeah. It's a small world.
Yeah.
It is a small world. So.
He stands in the shotgun. Jeremiah Love shifts from the right to the left. Blitz coming. Hartman, wide receiver screen to the right, 25-20. Running to the 15-10. And into the end zone goes Deion Colsey. Broke a tackle at the line of scrimmage and then sprinted across the stripe from 25 yards out. And Notre Dame now leads Navy 41-0. All
right, pleased to welcome in to the Independent, former guest of our former podcast, Ryan Harris. You remember him from his stand-up career at Notre Dame playing offensive tackle in the pros. He's got a Super Bowl ring. If you ever run into him around town, he might show it off to you. And then the radio voice of Notre Dame, too, with Paul Burmeister. And Ryan, obviously we want to talk about Navy and what you saw. But I think for people who don't know how you called the Navy game, give us a little backstory on that one, because that was unique.
Yeah, I mean, the height of broadcasting for play-by-play and color analysts is the NFL and doing NFL games. That's what I want to do, and that's what my partner, Paul Burmeister, wants to do in the future. And both of us had an opportunity. He worked with the Titans Friday night, and I had a Broncos game Saturday night. So we met in Denver, Colorado, of all places, to call the Notre Dame Navy game in Ireland from a side studio of the NBC affiliate here, Channel 9. And so we called the game. We had to make sure that not only we had like a feed from NBC who was there, but also just a regular NBC feed. And a couple of times during the broadcast, actually the feed we got from the stadium shut off, and we had to go to the actual NBC one that everyone was seeing at home. But it was unique. It was awesome. And hats off to everybody who pulled it off. Bill Carambellis, Paul Burmeister, all the people that made it possible, so that Paul and I could both, do one of our favorite jobs in the Irish and calling those games, while also aiming for the high tops here in the NFL and broadcasting.
Ryan, how's that come together? How's that proposed to you when you get your schedule for the year and you realize, wait, and I'm sure this happens to a lot of people in your field, but when you realize I got 2 games in 2 different countries on the same day, who makes the call? How do you put your brain power together and figure out a way to make this work?
Well, what it begins with, finding out what time games are in the NFL as well as in college. Because if there was a time issue where, let's say, Tennessee played early enough to where it interrupted the Notre Dame game, like a choice has to be made. But I got a call from Paul Burmeister. He said, "Hey, man, I think we both got a problem with the Ireland game." And for us, it was kind of this weird thing because we wanted to go to Ireland. We were so looking forward to going to Ireland. COVID happened. Ireland didn't happen. I was going to be the 35th black person to golf in Ireland, 3 behind Obama. It was going to be great. And so I'm sitting there. I'm like, what do you mean we might have a problem? He's like, I think I have a game and you have a game that night. And so then it became, okay, well, what time is the game going to kick off? What's the transit? So we're doing all these Mountain Time, Eastern Time, gender. I think it's called General Mountain or General, whatever the GMT tag stands for. So we figured it all out. Our operations people, Chris Heddle and others, as well as Brian Olson and Eddie over at Channel 9, just got together and made sure the dots were connected and the lines went through.
All right. So the game itself, I think I've been getting a decent amount of pushback, I think mostly from non-Notre Dame fans, that basically goes something like, it's Navy, calm down. But, I mean, when you watch, I just like Sam Hartman, let's start with that. I don't think that like it's Navy, calm down necessarily applies to what we saw from Sam Hartman on Saturday. What do you say?
Well, I say, do they say that to Alabama when they beat the brakes off of any team? No. What they do is they say, oh, this guy's the next first-round pick. This Will Anderson's going to be a first top 5 pick. So, the bias against Notre Dame is real. And the fun part, watching that game, there's so much that went on that makes you believe, if you know football, the Irish have an amazing opportunity this season. Let's just paint this for a picture. I'm sure we'll talk about Sam Hartman for a while. The backup quarterback came into the game and ran 3 plays in one. Steve Angeli had a play call we've never seen from Notre Dame, in which there was a run fake, a quarterback option, and then a sprint to the left if he didn't like what he saw to throw it to the receiver, which the backup quarterback did and completed. What other program has that kind of timing, ideas, thoughts, the double tight end motion counter runs that were happening, creating huge scores for Audric Estime to get over 90 yards rushing? That's not going anywhere. And that beats everybody. I know that from being in the trenches and winning a championship. When you can run the ball with creative plays in a timing and rhythm that offsets your defense, the sky's the limit.
Ryan, I'm curious, as an offensive lineman, how do you evaluate one offensive line play in one game off Navy, and two, you're seeing things differently when you're not there. You just are. I know the view probably is worse in the stadium than it is on TV, but when you're breaking down what you just saw and in real time, how do you evaluate offensive line play?
Well, number one, how accurate are they? Number two, how do they work together, right? Matt, if you and I are playing next to each other and I'm on one level, you're on a total other level, we've made a miscommunication. There's a problem. Passing off games. And I do believe the pass rush is going to be something that will markedly get better, especially as you go against, Ohio State and things like that. But there was one play in particular, but I look at the footwork, and that's important because footwork can make up for your eyes being wrong when you're an offensive lineman. And what I mean by that is I think there's a huge element of Joe Rudolph here, new offensive line coach, that's not getting enough praise. Zeke Correll, on one of the touchdown runs, Zeke Correll used the proper footwork to get to the right where his player looped over to the left. And as a lineman, your instinct is, that's my guy. I got to go find him. And if you remember last year, the offensive line had a lot of turning their shoulders one side or another. But what did Zeke Correll do? He stopped, and then he just looked for work to his right, because if somebody leaves, someone else is coming. So that tells me that not only has Joe Rudolph taught technique, the players understand it, have made incredible, because the only way you do it in a game is if you felt that technique work for you in practice, and then you execute it on a touchdown. I mean, that's elite level offensive line play. And that's the expectation at O-line U.
So get back into Hartman a little bit. What impressed you the most about him? What do you think travels the rest of the season? Because for me, I came out of that. I'm not sure if I felt like any differently about Notre Dame's matching up with USC or Clemson or Ohio State. But I felt like what Hartman could potentially give Notre Dame is like, not that you're upset proof, but the other 9 games that you play, I feel a lot more confident about Notre Dame in those, like the Pittsburgh, the Louisville, the NC State, than I did before the weekend, because of just Hartman just felt like a dude out there. I mean, the game, it felt like he was playing the game on 0.5 speed and everyone else was on 1.5, just because he looked like he had just seen everything and done everything, because in a lot of ways he has.
And he just got here a year ago, not even, right? I mean, think about that. He got to campus in March, so he's going to continue to learn, and I agree with you. It was remarkable. The number one thing that stands out to me is accuracy. Multiple of his 9 different receivers, when he threw them the ball, it literally hit them between the numbers. You know, I mean, Jaden Thomas, Greathouse. Think about Greathouse as a freshman receiver literally does not know how to catch a first down in a game. He only catches touchdowns. That's it. So, I mean, this is a total – this is what it looks like when you have a great quarterback. And I was fortunate to play with Brady Quinn in college, and I was fortunate to play with Hall of Famers in the NFL. When you have a dude, to take your word, at that position, there are no games that offense feels that they can't win the game. And then you add 2 preseason All-American tackles with 5 running backs who averaged over 4 yards per carry. I mean, this is where you start to say, okay, what's the defense going to stop? Yeah. Are you going to stop the run? Because then Sam Hartman can throw the ball 50 yards in the air between the numbers on a jersey. So go ahead and play the run. Okay, you want to drop back? They went the first third down. It was 3rd and 7, I believe, and they ran for it with Audric Estime.
It was
and
3rd and 10.
3rd and 10. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of confidence this offense is rolling with.
Defensively, what are your takeaways? I know there's so little that's actually translatable from Navy to anyone else, but for them to be as sharp as they were, and again, I said this on the last show, Pete, those first 2 drives, even though they didn't end well for Navy, I thought, all right, like they're not going to shut them out today, or they're not going to hold them under 10 points today, because Navy moved the ball decently enough, and then it was kind of game over from drive 3 on. I mean, how impressed were you with the way the defense really stuck to their assignments and played stout football?
I was so impressed. I'm concerned about depth, right? Like if you watch that film, Paul Mawala on the first play murdered a guy from Navy. I mean, he just absolutely destroyed this guy on a run play. JD Bertrand, Jack Kaiser, they played so well. I'm like, who's behind them? Like, how many reps do they have? Because these guys made all kinds of plays. DJ Brown was making plays in the backfield, and the team working together, right? And you're going to get your eyes in the backfield when you're playing Navy. This team defensively, I like the personnel. Jean-Baptiste, I like Jordan Botello playing out in the edge. And I can tell you right now, every running back that watches the film of that Navy game is going to be terrified of the leading tacklers by Notre Dame in Maris Liufau. That's what I meant to say, by the way, earlier. Maris Liufau, I apologize. Maris Liufau, JD Bertrand, and Jack Kaiser. So those 3 linebackers are just incredible. And Maris Liufau is arguably the most physical linebacker we've had at Notre Dame in a long time. And JD Bertrand, one of the most intelligent.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Marcus Freeman talk on Monday about Liufau, and just like that was sort of the first time he'd heard about Liufau when he showed up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because people forget, like, he basically broke his ankle the last day of training camp when Freeman's first year, and he never really got to play for him. And last year he played a ton but didn't make a ton of plays. And Freeman said on Monday, it's just like, that's the Liufau everyone told me I was getting when I showed up here. So to have that with like Bertrand and Kaiser, just it feels like you can see the football IQ of those linebackers as they play. And I'm with you on Botello, like, because like he was sort of a pass rush only guy, and to be stout against the run to make third down stops. I mean, that is something that should translate the rest of the season to me.
Yeah, I mean, stopping the run, that's a huge plus for the Irish. I mean, few teams face that type of a test early on in the season, and the key is to remember where your technique is, right? Nano Asafa-Mensah got caught a couple of times. Clearly he had the quarterback, and he went in because he thought he saw the running back get the ball on that fullback dive. But you also have to remember this defense, this is really the first year this defense has had to learn the defense for a full year. Al Golden comes in a little bit late in the process. You've got practices. Al Golden's figuring out the difference between the NFL and college. And boom, here you go. You got Ohio State to open. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot for any coach. A full year later, Maris Leofow, J.D. Bertrand, and others. I mean, Jordan Botello, they know their place. They know how it works together. And then you got Benjamin Morrison, the best corner in the nation back there, so they can cover up a lot of mistakes.
Switching gears a bit, Ryan, obviously home opener this week, Tennessee State, Eddie George's team, HBCU team. Not everyone was on board with this publicly when the game got announced last year, mainly because Notre Dame's never played an FCS team before, and I believe now USC is the only program that's never played an FCS team. But in your mind, what was your reaction when this game came to be, and what do you think is the significance of this off the field?
I was thrilled when I heard about it, and the significance is so great that its impact won't be completed for generations. I mean, there's so much to unpack here. One, just being in the right place. At Notre Dame, as an alumni, we are challenged to be a force for good. And anyone paying attention to the change that's happened in our society, the awareness, the growth, this is going to become more regular. And it says so much to Tennessee State. I mean, Eddie George is the head coach there. Eddie George is going to get to come to Notre Dame. And I'll tell you, give you an example. I was calling that Broncos game after the Irish beat Navy, and one of the guys stopped me from the Rams PR. He said, "Hey, you do the Notre Dame broadcast, right?" I was like, "Yeah, my name's Ryan Harris. Nice to meet you." He goes, "I just graduated from Tennessee State. Everyone is so excited and thankful that Notre Dame is having them for that game in week 2. We're in Denver, never met this guy, and that's how important it is for a first-year alumni, right? I mean, a lot of people are learning how to say HBCU, right? You know what I mean? I mean, so it's just such a monumental feat, and I can tell you from just being around campus, it's going to look different, that game. And how often do you get to go to something for the first time at Notre Dame Stadium, which is what we'll be able to do against Tennessee State. And it's just an amazing thing, and I credit Jack Swarbrick and Notre Dame for being consistent. I mean, one of my favorite photos, I actually fought with Brady Quinn over at a charity tournament, was of Father Hesburgh with Dr. King, and that says a lot to me, and that moment feels similar here with Tennessee State coming to town, HBCU.
It's I was already told that if you are attending the game this weekend, make sure Notre Dame's band, I think, will perform for about 5 minutes, beginning of halftime. Tennessee State will get the last 10 minutes or so. Like, make sure you're there for those 10 minutes. And you're right. It's like, it's going to look different. It's going to feel different. And I guess I understand, like, the FCS thing a little bit, just because, like, I mean, Notre Dame is nothing without traditions, whether they're worth holding on to or not. But it does feel like, all right, if you're going to share the spotlight, like, acknowledge Notre Dame has like this megawatt spotlight, and who it invites into it says something, you know. It's like,
yes,
there's so much talk about inclusion, and it feels like, if it's not like you're replacing Ohio State with Tennessee State, like,
right,
there's an opening in the schedule. How do we maximize the impact of this opening? And it feels like this will be kind of an interesting, cool way to do it.
For many of us, when we see something different for the first time, it changes us forever, right? And Notre Dame is bringing Tennessee State literally into their house in a way that has never been done before. And I can only imagine how many times that's going to happen across the country in the workplaces of Notre Dame alumni who this may not even be on their radar, right? And to see that and to think, wow, that's different. Oh, people behind Notre Dame must have made this a priority at some point in the last 2 years. Am I doing that? And that's the kind of impact it's going to have. And I'll tell you what, it makes a lot of alumni very, very proud to be a part of the Notre Dame family.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I mean, I get the non-FCS thing, but I do think, you know, to Pete's point, like, what's a cooler game, Central Michigan Notre Dame or Tennessee State Notre Dame, right? Like, I mean, yeah, you play a lot of bad teams every year. No offense to those teams, but like, let's make an event out of it. Let's make it an experience that everyone can enjoy. When I saw the announcement, I rolled my eyes a little bit like everyone else, and then I got on the phone with a couple people at Notre Dame. We're like, no, Matt, like, Jack Swarbrick really made it a priority, especially after 2020. Like, we need to do something here. What's one way we can do that with our football program? And this seems like an appropriate way to do it. Do you know Eddie George at all? Have you ever cross paths with him? Any
I've
relationship
only
there?
seen him in passing, Hall of Famer. You know, what I mean, he's just. I do remember him, running through defenses, but I can only imagine what it'll be for him to be the coach at Notre Dame. And think about that too, guys. I mean, I remember coming to Notre Dame on campus my first time. Right, Notre Dame changes you if you've got the open-mindedness. You're coming for the right reasons. What's that experience going to be like for a sophomore in Tennessee State's team? I mean, I didn't know that the dome was actually gold. I thought they just painted it gold in pictures, right? I mean, how was I supposed to know? I mean, they're going to see an entire world that many people do not understand and many people aren't exposed to. And that's worth it in and of itself, isn't it?
Well, kind of getting back to your history at Notre Dame, I think you tweeted out a photo of yourself with Tyrone Willingham recently. I was curious, like, how much you have kept in touch with him, what you learned from him, and like, he's a pretty private guy. So, but I would curious, like, what is he up to these days?
I know he plays golf twice a week, and I think that's all I can say about that.
Okay.
But it's not just Patrick, Coach Willingham. Coach Weiss and I talk still. I still talk with a lot of my great coaches. And one of the things about Coach Willingham, he always says, he said, "Hey, you were my guy then and you are my guy now." And he has always helped when it came to parenting, when it came to golf. I mean, I'm a golfer now, so we did talk a lot about golf, and there's just a tremendous bond from the time you spend together. And I'll never forget when he got fired that year, my sophomore year, before Charlie Weiss came in. I called Coach Willingham and said, "Coach, heard you had a bad day." He's like, "No, Ryan, I had a couple of bad hours. I never have a bad day." And like that sticks with me, sticks with me. So I anytime I'm in Santa Clara, I call him and we ate dinner before the Super Bowl, before we won Super Bowl 50, where he told us, "Hey, the team that's ready, the team that's prepared and not distracted is going to win." I thought that was us. And we got to meet up and talk about being a father and grandfather and the fact that he now is doing so much. And I really, as a man, look at him. Here's a guy who's done many different things in his career. And there's a shelf life for everything. And it's always great to talk to people who've done that, who've gone up and across and over the bridge and through the mountains,
Ryan, how much easier, for lack of a better term, does your life get right now? I think the NFL preseason's over. I'm completely out of it on that side. But now that you, broadcast-wise, game day-wise, you've got one primary obligation, how much simpler are things for you? And what was the last month like? Because it wasn't like you just showed up and called the game Saturday. You were preparing for that for months.
Well, I think one of the best things for me has been to learn how much something will come into use later for me. So I now also, too, with my CBS work expanding, I've gotten a lot more access to their research. So reading something about the Bengals right now may not help me, but reading it and remembering it week 5 or week 17 if I'm calling their playoff game, week 18 if I'm calling their playoff game, like that helps. So my last week coming into the game was rough, though, boys. I did Wednesday, Thursday. I do corporate speaking, so I did Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all-day events down at the Broadmoor, and then did a CBS hit there. Drove up, solo dad with my 2 boys for Friday night. Saturday morning, did the whole thing during the day. Sunday morning, woke up with my 2 boys, and then also had to finish the pro forma for a development class that I'm taking through the Urban Land Institute. So last night I got to relax. Wife and I got a little dinner, had a good time.
Busiest man in show business. All right, we'll let you get out here on this. Tennessee State, it's similar to Navy in the sense of like the opponent is not going to be at Notre Dame's level. So what are you going to be looking for on Saturday that may inform you, good, bad, and different, about where the season may go? Or is it just do you sort of see it as a one-off entirely?
Absolutely not. You want to see growth every week. So I want to see expanded roles from Greathouse and Tobias Merriweather. I want to see which running back really wants to establish himself as the number 2. I mean, I think Jabron Payne was fantastic. I mean, he was really a player who played well. And then continue to develop the tight ends. There's tremendous production. And I know in those big games from being in them, you need a tight end you can go to when it's crunch time. I mean, that was a part of what made Michael Mayer so good. He had other things as well, but you need that tight end to where those safeties invert and that in route's cut off, that you've got a tight end streaking down the middle of the field with his hand up, and continue to make those throws. The big key for Sam Hartman is going to be, can you be accurate? Can you continue high accuracy to force defenses to stop the pass and open up more for the run?
That's Ryan Harris. Thanks for joining us, buddy. The first bald guest on The Independent. First of many, I am sure. But
yeah,
we're trying to get you beat out Pete Bavacqua. He hasn't. He's not doing media quite yet, but we'll get him.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, great to be with you boys as always, and thank you. I read a lot of your articles, getting me ready for broadcasts, and I always love when I get to see you in person. So, see you guys this weekend.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. That was Ryan Harris. We thank him for joining the show, preceded by Joe Montana. Thanks, Pete, for getting that done and getting some actual work done overseas. Probably spent more time in the air each way than you did on the ground in Dublin, but we're all better for it. Very enlightening stuff from both of them, as you would expect. It was interesting to hear Ryan's thoughts about the significance of this home opener against Tennessee State. There are plenty of other things going on in the college football world, though, in the Notre Dame world as well. Pete, you had a good story on The Athletic right ahead of kickoff, looking at Marcus Freeman's relationships with other Notre Dame head coaches on campus. I want to get into that a little bit. How did that? I mean, we've seen some social media, posts here and there of him being in the crowd, but you kind of went, beneath the surface a little bit more and saw that it's more than just for the gram.
Yeah, it's like. Obviously, there's the social media opportunity, because like nothing happens in the world today without it being on social media. And I knew it was more to that because I knew that Marcus Freeman, like, he just really likes sports. Like he's just a fan of sports and competition. But I felt like it was more than that. And I took it as like, maybe this is like his way of like learning about being a head coach, because like, I realize lacrosse and football are not the same thing, but Kevin Corrigan just won a national championship. He's been to, I think, 6 Final Fours now. Or Jeff Jackson, the hockey coach, has won 2 national championships. I think he's been to 5 Frozen Fours. Selena Rockwell, the volleyball coach, was a national championship player and assistant coach. And then Neil Ivey, obviously, was the national championship player as well. So there's a lot. I sort of took it as like, well, clearly he's forming his relationships in part because he's just like a generally good guy, but so he can learn. And what I found out was like while that is true, that he is learning from these other coaches, that there was much more that they were learning from him than I was sort of thought going into it, or the fact that Marcus Freeman meets with recruits for hockey and volleyball and women's basketball. That really surprised me, because I mean, how many football programs in the country at the level of Notre Dame operate as like an athletic department of one sport, and then every other sport is in a separate athletic department? It's like a very like kind of it's just separate, and they're not the same. They're not treated the same. Like we can pretend that they are, but they're not. And the head football coach likes it that way. I think that's sort of how Notre Dame operated under Brian Kelly, where like, just leave me alone in the goog. Don't talk to me. And look, that worked for Brian Kelly. I'm not saying that it didn't, but that's just like not who Marcus Freeman is. So I felt like it turned out to be sort of a look into sort of what makes Marcus Freeman tick as a person as much as it did what makes Marcus Freeman go as a coach.
It's interesting you put it that way, because we are talking about a football program that is independent from the rest of its, sports on campus, as far as they're not in a conference. Right. Everyone else is in the ACC, which has been in the news a lot. I know your colleagues at The Athletic have been writing about it. I've been writing about it a lot at the Inside Zone. There will be likely a vote taken this week, perhaps by the time the show airs, to add Stanford, Cal, and SMU at varying degrees of buy-in in the ACC. And it's interesting to hear that Notre Dame's been kind of banging the table the most, at least in regards to Stanford and Cal, to get them in, because they want like-minded institutions, high-performing academic institutions, to have a seat at the table in this new college football power structure, whatever that may be. I was putting stuff together the other day, and the ACC had just gotten rid of divisions this year. They would obviously have to redo their schedules for next year if they add 2 or 3 more teams. That Notre Dame thing becomes a little bit easier, though, if you're still only playing 5 ACC games a year, and one of those games is Stanford every year. You get a little bit more flexibility there if you're the Irish.
I mean, don't you think like the ACC would be like, very rarely do they have leverage over Notre Dame? I do think this is one point. Not that you're going to say Notre Dame, you need to join the ACC in full, but like maybe you at least need to average 5.5 ACC games
Right.
over the life of the deal. Like, because that Notre Dame clearly is going to want Stanford to count as an ACC game.
Sure.
If frees up scheduling, the ACC, I would be like, no. This is independent of your ACC scheduling agreement, because we want to sell tickets and we want the ACC network. So you're going to help us make more money because we've helped you make more money. So I'm very interested to sort of see how that works. Like, in theory, like if Notre Dame got what it wanted and the ACC would count Stanford as a league game, but also like a rivalry game where you got that every year, I think the rest of the league would be like, heck no, we're not doing that, because it hurts. It just makes you play everyone else less. Maybe there's some middle ground there between Notre Dame and the ACC to help get this done. Because it certainly, I mean, your reporting on the Inside Zone would lead me to believe that, like, not that it's an inevitability, but it's close to one that this is going to happen.
Not dead. Yeah. Like, yeah, I mean, there was never a formal vote taken. That's the frustrations I've gotten from both the A and A sides in the ACC is like, this has been talked about for almost a month now. The season's about to be here. And there's never been like, all right, we're doing this or we're not. Let's take a vote. Yeah. And there have been different financial models, worked behind the scenes and presented to particularly the no voters about, hey, here's what you're going to get out of this. Here's why we should do it. But you need some clarity. I mean, it's just the most college football thing ever. And we saw this last year. I remember sitting in Midway Airport to board my flight to Columbus for Notre Dame Ohio State week 1. And, oh, hey, college football playoff just announced they're going to 12 teams in 2 years instead of 4. And that's all we're going to talk about. Like, you had 9 months to figure your stuff out and like give the people who are the actual gateway and entry into the sport, the players and coaches, like their 3 months to shine. And they couldn't even do that. Right. They had to bicker for months on end and eventually announce it on week 1. And it looks like it's trending similarly for the ACC here. You hope they get it done before week 1, right before Saturday. There are college football playoff commissioner meetings Wednesday and Thursday in Dallas. So I don't know I don't think that as a hard deadline, but I'm sure it'd be a lot easier for all these commissioners to get in a room together and talk about what they want when they actually know who's going to be in their conferences next year in time for the 12-team playoff. I remember when, it feels like a while ago now, the ACC did announce Notre Dame's opponents through like 2000. It might have been 36. Like it was
I think it's 36.
Like the length of the deal. And obviously nothing is permanent in college sports. The idea of, I can't even begin to picture what the landscape will look like by the time that ACC TV deal is up. But yeah, I'm sure Notre Dame will say like, look, we've got our opponents. And by the way, we've got Stanford. Like we're done as far as like making any other concessions to you. I don't know how it's going to work. I was surprised throughout this process, throughout the last month, to learn that Notre Dame does have a full vote since they're not a full member. And especially if we're in a vote as close as this one, right? Like they'll announce it as unanimous either way. It's not going to be unanimous. That they could essentially be a deciding vote is got to be very triggering for everyone.
Because they just need one more, right? Like
it's
North Carolina, NC State, Clemson, Florida State. You just need to peel off one of those 4.
Correct. Okay. And the thing with me, and this is another conversation for another day, I look at a school like SMU, which is essentially going to fund its way in. They're not going to take any media rights revenue for the first 7 years or so. Let's see SMU does really good. Let's say SMU is a regular ACC contender. They're in those 7 years. And let's say in this hypothetical world where the ACC still exists in 13 years and they're renegotiating their television deal in 2036, the ACC says, hey, Boston College, we paid you more money than SMU. You've won 3 games a year. SMU's won the conference a couple times. Figure it out. Like that's the next step of this, right? Like the Rutgers of the world in the Big Ten, like the cutting off of schools.
SEC.
Yeah, Vanderbilt will stay because they make everyone's academic profile look good and they're a founding member. But yes, no, I mean, to your point, that's the next step of this. Realignment used to be like, all right, what television market are you in? Oh, like New York, Rutgers, great, we'll take you. Now it's like, how much will you pay to get in? Like Oregon, you'll take a 50% pay cut. All right, come on in. Like great. Yep. And that's where it is right now with the ACC, and that's what will ultimately get these schools in if they do get in. And I just can't imagine the precedent that's going to set for a lot of the schools that think they're on solid ground right now, but might not be 5-10 years from now financially.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I want to ask you about a couple other things you're working on. One, you made a trip up to Wisconsin last weekend. I don't know if that will be published by the time this podcast hits, but also you went down to Nashville, spent some time with definite friend of the show and friend of the hairstyle, Clark Lee. How was Vanderbilt? Because like I was a little bit worried about our friend Clark on Saturday in their week 0 against Hawaii, because that was not smooth sailing. As if you read The Athletic, Joe Rexrode sort of wrote about it a little bit. Like it, and no other Power 5 school would play in a stadium like Vanderbilt's playing in right now. That is a construction site.
I would push back on that. Oregon State last year had like 3/4 of their stadium under construction.
Are they still Power 5?
For this year, at least, when the stadium's complete. Hey, they won 10 games. They can strut their stuff, unlike Vanderbilt yet. Yeah, I went to Vandy when I was in Nashville for actually Tennessee State's right there too. But for SEC Media Days in July, spent an afternoon with Clark and some of his guys. And one of the first things he said was, "Matt, we got to get your boy Pete back here." I left him on a very sour note. It was ugly. It was week 1. My first career game as a head coach. We get killed by an FCS team. The Zoom recording doesn't work. I've got to walk to my office.
So bad.
He's like, I owe Pete better. Tell him to come. We need a redemption tour. And then I saw Nick Lazinski, another friend of the show and Notre Dame program. And Clark saw me talking to him and said, "Oh, great. Last time I let him talk to someone who worked or used to work for The Athletic, I was able to wake up to a long feature on this guy the next day." It's probably what prompted him to hire him. But Clark's good. It was not the easiest performance. Can I admit something here? Actually, I have no problem admitting it because we just talked about our sleep patterns here. I actually fell asleep in the fourth quarter of that Vanderbilt game Saturday night. They were up 21 when I fell asleep, so I thought it was over. And I mean, they did win, but by a lot less than that. That game had about a 2-hour delay, I think, because of lightning. So it ended well after midnight. Well, you were on a different time.
I was totally messed up with that because we were recording The Independent from over the weekend, and then I went to bed and the game was going on, and I woke up and the game was still going on when I was going to the airport. It was very confusing.
Yeah, that was it wasn't the smoothest performance for them, and Hawaii obviously played spirited. Hawaii at home Friday against Stanford, another Notre Dame opponent. That is a sneaky, and I don't even know if it's sneaky anymore, like good game. Like that, Hawaii could win that one, and that would be interesting for Stanford. But Clark's good. His program's good. I mean, the whole campus right now is under construction. It almost like mirrors the city of Nashville, where it's just growing at such an incredible rate. They've got upwards of $500 million worth of facilities upgrades on the way. It's going to take about 3 years, but every single athletic program on Vanderbilt's campus is getting affected by it in some way, shape, or form. And when you look at the stadium, which is under 30,000 now with construction, will probably be about 35 or so when it's all said and done. They're going to look at it like an event. Like, hey, come watch SEC football in the biggest and best city in the SEC footprint. I'll be curious to see if Northwestern takes a similar approach with Ryan Field, where it's like you don't want to embrace the fact that you're like an extra home game for every visitor, but like Georgia football, Alabama football playing in Nashville, that should be an event. Like everyone in Nashville should be talking about that and should go to campus for that game and have fun with it. There's going to be a lot of outdoor premium seating there. I'm sure they'll have some live music and whatnot. It looks really, really cool. I mean, they're a long way from done. But, you've got an alum head coach who showed a lot of progress in year 2, who's in it for the long haul. One funny note, actually, he told me on the way out, he took a Hawaiian vacation with his family. He went to the hotel weight room every morning for a quick workout. And it was the only one of the few places and times on earth as a head football coach, you can like be alone and not be recognized. And on the last morning there, he's lifting weights and he hears Clark. And he turns around and Marcus Freeman was there, just checked in with his family to the same Hawaiian resort. And Clark said they never actually met. Like they talked a lot.
I wrote this big extensive Marcus story and I talked to Clark about it. And he said that, Clark talked Marcus into the Notre Dame job over LSU, but like he tried to, like he presented Notre Dame of like, this is why I love Notre Dame. And then Marcus said he also talked to Dave Aranda, who was at LSU before he went to Baylor. And the tone of that conversation was totally different. About Aranda was much more like, yeah, LSU was a business decision. Like, I'm not going to say anything bad about it. And that was it. Whereas Marcus said, like, Clark talked his ear off about Notre Dame so much that Joanna was like in the room. She had fallen asleep, and Marcus had to like go in his closet and like lay down on the ground to finish the conversation with Clark. And I was like, "You've never talked to Clark before, right?" And he's like, "No." And I was like, "Yeah, it's always 45 minutes." So yeah, that's hilarious that they were in the same resort at the same time. Also, both in the weight room, which is not surprising at all.
I know it's a lonely existence as a football coach, but it's great. Like, there's such a small world. It's like, of course, they vacation at the same place. Like, at Pac-12 Media Day this year, I asked Lincoln Riley, "How'd you get so close with Dabo Sweeney? I heard Dabo, that's part of why he hired your brother Garrett." And he goes, "Oh yeah, we ran into each other skiing in Colorado, and that became our vacation hub with our families every year." I'm just like, of course, like it's such a lonely existence. You have so few people, and I guess Marcus is unique in this regard because you mentioned it with the story you wrote about how kind of one of the guys and girls he is on campus with the rest of the coaches. But it's a very lonely existence.
Yeah. Maybe I'm surprised more coaches don't reach out to other coaches just to be like, "Can we be friends?" All right. This weekend, Notre Dame, Tennessee State. We asked Ryan a little bit what he was going to look for. How about for you? I mean, just what is interesting to you about this game aside from the Tennessee State band, the HBCU connection, the FCS stuff? Like, just from a football point of view, what's interesting to you about Saturday for Notre Dame?
Can they build off that ridiculously clean performance from Saturday? And that would be hard to like envision, short of like the final score and like crazy yardage numbers for Hartman and the running backs. But again, we went into the Navy game. All right, what are we really going to learn from this, right? They're probably going to win, and they're probably going to beat Tennessee State, and then we'll find out more at NC State. But no, like, Sam Hartman looked like he didn't break a sweat that game. He did not even have to put his head down and carry the ball once. He had just 4 incomplete passes. He threw his receivers open. They had 5 or 6 running backs who were an active part of the game plan. Can they keep that up and maybe even build off it this week against Tennessee State? They haven't punted yet, right? The only drive that ended was
come on, Bryce McPherson. Let's get in the game.
So what can they keep that going against Tennessee State? And then defensively, let's force some turnovers. If I'm nitpicking, and again, it's a lot harder to force turnovers against Navy than it is another team.
And they were close, right?
They were close. Yeah,
it looked like they recovered 2 fumbles. For some reason, they didn't.
It did look that way, and one of them I'm still not sure what happened, but force a turnover or 2. Keep them out of the end zone. Now, just scanning Tennessee State's roster, I'm not going to sit here and say like, "Oh, I know all about Tennessee State." I don't. But there are a number of Power 5 skill position players on that roster from Tennessee, from Auburn, from other schools. So there are athletes on that roster. I wouldn't. I know it's an FCS opponent. It's an opponent you're not going to see on your schedule again anytime soon. You're probably not familiar with them. So was Marshall. And Marshall had 18 transfers from all sorts of different schools that looked like the more athletic team against Notre Dame. That's not going to happen to that extent Saturday, but I do think everyone will probably be a little bit surprised at like, oh yeah, like they play football at the FCS level too, and some of it's pretty good.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing Notre Dame just like blowing the doors off them. Like you see some of these FCS scores, like a 52-0.
Right.
In part because this is very new for Notre Dame, but I mean, also the biggest part is like, as I'm dragging here in my dining room recording this podcast, like I'm not going to class at Notre Dame and then practicing in the afternoon and watching film and going to meetings and getting it taped up. Like this is a weird thing to mention, but like Notre Dame started classes last week and then Notre Dame football left immediately. So in some ways, like the players are like a little bit behind on that stuff. I realize this is the first week of class. It's not the most punitive time to fall behind, but they've just got a lot going on. And I think the idea of Notre Dame playing exceptionally clean on Saturday at home with all the extra stuff going on, but mostly just because you played Navy the week before abroad, the Navy hangover has been a thing kind of regularly. I don't think the Navy hangover will be an issue on Saturday. I just think it will be more of an Ireland travel hangover than anything else. And so then there's no line on the game, but I could see it being, if I would make a prediction like a 38-10, you comfortably win. Steve Angeli gets some reps, but it's not like it was a pick your score type of performance, which I felt as the Navy game was getting into the second quarter. It was like, this is pick your score stuff. Like they could do whatever they wanted to them all night. I don't think the Tennessee State game is going to feel that way. I think that's fine. I think Saturday is much more about how many reps can you give backups like Steve Angeli over how did the starters play? Because I think the starters will play fine. They don't need to be exceptional.
Right. It'd be good for everyone to get their legs underneath them before the real test a week later at NC State. I'm with you. I got 45-14. Again, I couldn't find a line anywhere on this thing. They rarely exist when they're an FBS team playing an FCS team. But I think part of, I hate to say backlash, but again, like the announcement that they were playing Tennessee State last year raised a lot of eyebrows, and it's not unique to Notre Dame's fan base, but every fan base has a vocal minority that complains about literally everything, and it was no different with this announcement. But I do think part of that was the timing of this game, playing a game the week after Ireland. It doesn't happen anymore. They did it in 2012, and they damn near paid for it. They probably should have. There was some questionable calls that saved them.
When they announced the Ireland game, like our Swarbrick talked about lessons learned and how they weren't going to play the next week, or like that was part of the planning of it. So I think the adding of this game, you're right. It's like there's a lot of things in play here. It's not just the FCS stuff.
Yeah. So I think it'd be, naive to think human nature doesn't creep in a little bit, and they're not as crisp as they were in their opener. So yeah, I've got 45-14. Now I'll be curious to see how the defense plays against what's presumably a more traditional offense. And I'll be curious to see how much the offense has to really work this week as opposed to last week when it seemed like they really didn't have to at all.
No doubt. Well, we'll learn something we always do, and then we will be reconvening on Saturday evening. So that Sunday therapeutic podcast will be there for you when you're walking your dog or making pancakes or whatever on Sunday morning. And maybe you'll have a good Coach Prime story after whatever happens to them against TCU.
I did. By the way, when they announced the Tennessee State game, Deion was still at Jackson State, and I said, "You guys told me you were going to make an effort to schedule an HBCU. Did you at least try Jackson State?" And they said, "No, we didn't want any part of that."
No, that would have been a show and a half.
Well, he wouldn't be there.
I know God, what a disappointment that would be. So I think Tennessee State, Eddie George, probably a safer opponent. But the Independent, our podcast, will be back this weekend to wrap up whatever we learned from Tennessee State. Maybe take a peek ahead to NC State. I don't know who the Wolfpack play on Saturday. Did you know?
Thursday they're at UConn, so they have 9 days off.
Okay, I mean, might learn a little bit. I mean, UConn is not. It's not Bob Bianco's UConn anymore.
No, it's not Randy Edsall's either. Randy Edsall's UConn teams. No, they were one of the more surprising stories in college football last year. Weird home environment because you got to create your own energy. Midweek game. NC State, of all teams, knows how to play down and up to its competition.
Yeah.
But I mean, we'll get more NC State next week. I'm very intrigued by Brendan Armstrong reuniting with Robert and I, because those two did a lot of good things together at Virginia, and they're back in Raleigh now.
Yeah, I think it'll be the crux of our midweek podcast a week from now. But until then, you've been listening to The Independent. He's Matt. I'm Pete. We appreciate Ryan Harris and Joe Montana for joining the show and kind of giving our listeners a little something extra new. And I also want to give a shout out to the Notre Dame Radio Network for some of the clips that we were able to use in today's show to sort of add a little production value. It's fun to hear Paul Burmeister and Ryan Harris. Not that that's why we had Ryan Harris on, but it's fun to hear sort of those calls and sort of let them live on beyond the radio broadcast on Saturdays. So until Matt and I get together again on Saturday night, you've been listening to The Independent. This is our third episode. Please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of that good stuff. We appreciate the feedback. I appreciate people shouting me out on the streets of Dublin, how much they love the Independent. That was great too. So we want to keep this momentum rolling. You guys are a big part of it, and we appreciate you. So until next time, he's Matt, I'm Pete. Thanks for being with us on the Independent.